like, as a woman and somebody going into the healthcare field, I personally don't, it's on your opinion on abortion. I personally don't think that, like, I could have an abortion just because morally I feel like for myself it wouldn't be the right choice. But how do you defend your opinion as a white, well-off, religious man? How do you defend your, telling a woman what she can do with her body?
Because evil things are still evil, even if I'm a white, well-off religious man. And good things are still good, even if I'm a white, well-off religious man. So this is one of these. This is one of these identity politics points that I really, I don't mean to come down harshly on you, I don't, but it is a point that I really have serious moral qualms with. I think it's quite terrible. The reason being that the people who were fighting against enslavement of black people were a bunch of well-off white men for the most part. Right? And those people were saying, this is a moral sin. This is a moral blot. They weren't living in the South. They didn't own plantations. They didn't live the lives of the plantation owners. They said, this is evil, and we are here to stop it. Right? When you see something that you think is morally wrong happening, especially when you're talking about the taking of a human life, like, listen, I think that you shouldn't go around randomly killing homeless people. I just have this view. I'm not a homeless person. Most of the people who randomly kill homeless people are probably not of my economic strata, my religious view, or my, I don't know whether they're of my skin color or not. I have no idea what the actual sociological breakdown of homeless killer serial murderers is. But I would suggest that my identity has nothing to do with what is right or wrong. And this is what Western civilization used to be about. Western civilization used to be about the idea that, yes, I'm not a woman in the healthcare field, but you and I can have a conversation about what's right and wrong because this is the nature of human reason. The nature of human reason, the nature of right and wrong, is that you and I can talk about what's right and wrong and that I don't retreat into my identity. If we can all retreat into our identity and our morality is now centered around that identity, morality doesn't exist at all. We break down into a society of fragmented atoms where I can't even say, like, you're torturing a puppy in your backyard. I have nothing to say about that. I'm not a white woman who's in the healthcare field. I'm not going to do that. I refuse to surrender the idea that I can have a moral stance on issues that are of concern to society and of concern to the well-being of the United States simply because of the color of my skin or the nature of my genitalia. And honestly, I believe any view that feels differently is sexist, racist, and bigoted.
We cannot fully identify a gender of a person right when we see them, so therefore I believe that it is not within my own individual liberty to gender that person.
Here's my problem with that particular argument. The answer is that in 99.8%, 99.9% of cases, you absolutely can gender somebody based on looking at them. Like, really. If you're going to use intersex people as an example of not being able to do that, this does not obviate the biological duality of sex upon which all progeneration is based for all of human history and for all mammalian species. So intersex people do not invalidate the concept of sex as a generality. Intersex people are people who have a biological anomaly. And by the way, in most cases of intersex, those people still manifest as either a male or a female. So the idea that intersex exists does not invalidate the idea that there is a male and that there is a female, or that in nearly all cases, I can tell the difference between a male and a female. Again, I'm not saying, by the way, that if you can show me your chromosomal charts that you are actually not a male, when I say that you're a male, that I should stick with that biological objective standard. Like my perception of you, in other words, is subject to my correct enunciation of an objective standard. So the objective standard, here's the deal. For all of human history, there was an objective standard between male and female. It was, for nearly all of human history, out of partial ignorance and partially because this is usually true, it was out of simply looking at people's genitals and assessing them based on their outward appearance, right? Which is still true for nearly all human beings on planet Earth at all times. Okay. What was that?
You can't really describe someone without secondary sex characteristics and gender them into something.
Well, I mean, you can based on primary sex characteristics if you can see their genitals. Doctors do this literally at birth all the time, right? So this is but your point is correct. If somebody was male dressed as a female and I misgendered them and then they said, "Oh, look, I'm male," zip, right? Then I would say correct, and then correct. I would say, for all of human history, you were male. Now the standard is chromosomal. Right? It's the SRNY gene and all of this. There is some objective standard, in other words, by which we can determine sex. The problem I have with the transgender argument is that people are arguing that there is no objective standard, that no objective standard exists by which I can determine sex. And in fact, sex is completely subjective. I can determine my own gender based on no biology and in fact in abeyance of biology. I can have every single biological characteristic of a male And if I say I am female, then I am female. This is anti-scientific nonsense. There is not a biologist worth their salt on planet Earth who would say that sex does not exist.
Yeah, I agree.
So if sex exists, then what are the characteristics of sex? And the problem with biological anti-realism or scientific anti-realism, as you're suggesting, is that there is no actual standard of sex, that it's completely malleable.
I'm not saying that sex is malleable. I'm saying there is male and female biologically. That is true, yes.
Right.
But I'm saying that gender is a spectrum. I'm saying that there is at least male, female, and non-binary because of this strange.
And what I'm saying is that there's a word game that goes on when people discuss gender. Because if we are talking about certain characteristics to which we attribute to masculine or feminine, if you want to say that there's a genetic male with feminine characteristics, we're fine. That's a male with feminine characteristics. Fine. That's fine. I mean, okay. So you're a man with feminine characteristics. That's cool. Who cares? Okay, but that doesn't make you a woman. In other words, if you're going, what we are now doing is we're playing a semantic game where we say a male with feminine characteristics is a woman. That's nonsense. Or a woman with male characteristics, masculine characteristics, is a man. That's nonsense too. And by the way, it actually ends up misgendering a lot of people who are just butch women or effeminate men. Right? So all of this, so in other words, by trying to separate out gender and sex completely, and then by using terms like male and female or woman and man that are innately connected to sex, what you are doing is deliberately, not you, what people are doing is deliberately confusing the issue such that you get idiocies like Ilhan Omar writing to the Powerlifting Association of the USA saying that a transgender woman who is a biological male should be able to compete against biological women because it is a myth that men can pick up heavier objects than women. That is not a myth, that's called science. Thank you.
Obviously, in light of everything that's going on at the moment, we all believe rape and sexual assault are heinous crimes. We all want rapists behind bars. But I feel that in this climate, logic, evidence, and data are kind of being lost in translation. And also there's a very pervasive you're with us or against us mentality that's really doing a lot more harm than good. So my question to you is, how can we best stand up for the importance of due process and the presumption of innocence while also doing what we can to support survivors?
Okay, so I think that there's actually a third question that I want to address that you didn't even ask. So I'll address the first two, and then there's a third one that I think is implicit in the first two. So when it comes to standing up for due process, the answer is that we actually have to stand up for it, even in cases where it makes us uncomfortable, or even where we believe that the person may be responsible for something bad, because once you lose due process for one, you lose due process for everybody, obviously. When it comes to standing up for sexual assault survivors, I think the idea that we ought to take everybody's first account with the respect it deserves means not dismissing, not downplaying, but it also means asking the proper questions in order to get at the truth. That doesn't mean intimidating people. It doesn't mean calling people liars without evidence that they're lying. It doesn't mean mocking them, obviously, God forbid. It doesn't mean doing any of those things. You know, I've throughout the Christine Blasey Ford thing, I keep saying over and over and over, I'm not calling her a liar. I'm not mocking her. I don't know if she's lying. I don't know if she's telling the truth. I don't know if she's misremembering. I don't know any of that stuff. All I know is that due process requires such and such to happen. Now, the real answer in the end to a lot of what's happening, and here's the really unpopular part with the left. The left destroyed traditional mores with regard to relations between the sexes. Destroyed them wholesale. So the original idea was that men were supposed to act with honor and chivalry in protecting women, and women were supposed to look for example, relationships just as men were. Sexual activity was supposed to be confined, this was at least the ideal, was supposed to be confined to committed relationships, particularly marriage. Not everybody lived up to that, but a huge number of people did. In fact, once people got pregnant, people basically got married. There's studies from the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s shows an awful lot of 7-month marriage babies, right? People who are sleeping together, getting pregnant, and then the couple gets married. When you don't teach men to protect women, you get men who will victimize women. And when you don't teach women that they ought to cherish men who are responsible and good, all you end up doing is incentivizing bad male behavior. The feminist movement was not wrong when they said men are acting like pigs. They were wrong when they said women also ought to act like pigs and that this is a solution to our problem. Because now what's happened is they got rid of all the traditional mores about how sex ought to be connected with love and ought to be connected with relationships. They got rid of all of that. It was just a bodily function now. Except when it comes to actual sexual assault, we treat that differently than any other bodily function, obviously. But that's the problem, right? So they create this standard where sex is basically a throwaway item, sort of like eating. And then we treat sex very differently when it comes to what we all know it is, which is a deeply important and intimate part of a person's life. And then we attempt to backdoor standards of consent that, frankly, don't make any sense in a real-life context. So you get college campuses in California saying that what you need is a yes means yes standard. where you have like a legal checklist, I guess, where every time you do anything in the bedroom, you're supposed to ask, am I allowed to touch your hand? Am I allowed to touch your shoulder? Am I allowed to touch your hair? Which has never, ever resulted in actual fulfillment of a sexual encounter, right? I mean, it's sort of like, it's like Zeno's paradox. If you have a yes means yes standard, the closer you get, the further away you are. And and again, sex is, this is where women really gave up on marriage a lot too soon. Okay, marriage was the best thing ever for women. It is an amazing thing for men too, because it civilizes them, it cultures them, it teaches them to be protectors of their family and to take care of people and to think beyond themselves and to think beyond their generation. Women gave up in marriage a way to teach men to do those things. And also, women gave up the idea that a commitment was going to come along with this intimacy. And let's be real about this. I mean, every scientific study ever done has shown that women actually do have better sex in the context of committed relationships. All of the crap that you see in Cosmo magazine about sleeping with 100 guys and being sexually happy is just garbage. It is just sheer unadulterated garbage. So, no, long answer to a short question, but reinculcation of traditional roles of male and female with the same feminist respect that we ought to have for women at all steps of the process is the answer.
Thank you. I hope people are listening.